I'm going to be reading They Poured Fire on Us from the Sky, the true story of 3 lost boys from Sudan, 10th anniversary edition, by Alphonsine Dang, Benson Dang, Benjamin Ajak, with Judy A. Bernstein, copyright 2015. Part 1, The Village of Jewel. The blade is blunt. Benson. Since my wandering began, there hasn't been a day or night that I do not think back to my family, our people in lovely Dinkaland. I am the 5th child from a big family with 5 brothers and 3 sisters. My parents were pastoralists and subsistence farmers of the Bahr el Ghazal region of southern Sudan. We call ourselves Dinka now, but according to our elders' stories, there was no such name before the British arrived. When an explorer came to our remote area and met a group of Monijeng men hunting, he stopped them. "Who are you, young men?" he asked in a strange language. "Dinkak," they replied, calling themselves by the chief's name according to the tradition of our people. The explorer wrote down Dinka, and that is how the name came into being. Before all the ruin and waste came, we Dinka people had cows as a source of wealth and were very proud of them. To be rich, a man needed to own more than 150 head of cattle. My father wasn't rich. He owned 90 cows, but it was enough to be happy and proud. My mother wore the radiating 5-line scarification mark on her forehead as a sign of her bravery. Any woman who had this scar could even join men in battle. Taller than my father, she was the 3rd and most respected of his 5 wives. She could not be made to work for the more senior wives, as most Dinka women were, but did as she wished for the good of the family. She was very independent, and once she even fought my father for arguing with his younger wife. We slept in small, mudded huts, thatched with grasses, and when it was cold, we kindled a fire inside with wood. Most of the time, only my mother and us kids used the house. My father was usually away attending court, because he was an important member of society who helped in difficult decisions. When he was home, he slept in our hut or in the huts of his other wives. I still hear echoes of the ground hornbill howling and weaver birds singing and building their nests in the thorny bushes. I would stand under acacia trees and watch the giraffes curl their black tongues around the leaves above. They would glance at me and then ignore me, a little boy who could do them no harm. At night, when screaming hyenas fought lions and awoke everybody, I cuddled close to my mother. Each family member had daily chores to do as best as they could. The girls pounded the grains and only left the house to fetch water or firewood. We boys never stayed home like the girls, but scattered during the day to see to our duties. My 2 older brothers led the cows to good pasture and water, and I took the goats, sheep, and calves to graze. Sometimes we hunted small animals like squirrel, rabbit, or mongoose. Together we smoked them out of their holes and let the dogs do the running part. When the chores were done, I played with my friends and we formed groups, walking from house to house, chewing on sorghum cane. After harvest time, we sat in the dry field and dug with our feet in the soil for peanuts to play ket-ket, my favorite game. We pretended those nuts were our cattle, and the boy who had the most nuts was the most powerful that day. It was important to me to win that game, but back then, small things defeated me easily. If I lost a silly game, or even if food preparation took too long, I would pout in the corner, still as an empty pot. My mother did the housework, but above all, she was the best cook. From the wine to the porridge, the other wives praised her skill. She was known for making different kinds of wine on New Year's Eve and in the morning, walking around, hitting 2 small pieces of wood together and calling, "Come drink free wine." Those who didn't drink alcohol could have the wine made with millet flour, but no yeast. This wine made you feel refreshed, as good as juice, with no intoxication at all. Even young children drank this wine. A lot of people came and finished her wine early, which made my mother happy. She made beautiful pots from clay and huge grain storage baskets from reeds taller than me for my father to sell. My father exchanged the money for food and clothes in the city. As a little boy, I didn't mind being naked, but by the time I was 4, I wasn't happy seeing other children wearing their beautiful clothes. When my father came home with clothes for others and not for me, I wouldn't talk to him. At your young age, he said, it's okay to be naked for a while. But it wasn't okay. I wanted clothes too. Other children looked beautiful in their clothes compared to my shy, bare body. The life of the Dinka changed according to the seasons. We harvested in the autumn and planted at the end of summer or the middle of spring. When heavy rains came, the brooks filled with water, and young men took the cattle to graze at the cattle camp, a huge grassy area where all of the villages collected their cows. When the sun shone again, the sky was clear except for the smoke soaring from the village cooks and an outpouring of tiny winged termites. Marabou, storks, swallows, glossy starlings, shoebill herons, and the egrets that walk with cows flew in to reap the termite blooming. Indolent birds perched at the top of the hegelic and acacia trees, and ground hornbills waddled lazily along the prairie, howling. When spring planting began, my job was to sit by the nursery and protect the newly sprouted sorghum and maize. I scared the birds away with mud balls until it became too hot. Then my mother sent me to call my father to lunch. Sometimes I was sent to the neighbor's house to get the fire, and I would carry home an ember on a piece of broken calabash or dried cow dung. In the afternoons, I cleaned the goat shed and arranged the goats in their pens. I worked a lot, but at night we rested, and the elders told us Dinka folklores and described how life was before we were born. Our houses were surrounded by fields of grass, and so we would gather close by the fire where we could see our surroundings while scorpions and snakes wandered about in the dark. It was on these nights with my family when I learned the most about my ancestors and the Dinka people and how we were supposed to live. At night, the bigger termites came out from their mound, which was taller than a man. My mother harvested them by digging a hole the size of a large pumpkin in front of the mound and waiting behind it with a burning bundle of dried grasses. The termites, attracted to the light, flowed out like disturbed fire ants, and Mother swept them into the hole with her broom and singed them to death with her fire. In less than half an hour she'd have 3 big baskets full of them, but she had to be quick and careful because frogs and snakes appeared from all around to share in the harvest. Drying the termites took 2 or 3 days and made the heads drop off. Once the wind removed the chaff, they glowed golden with oil. I liked them best fried, but boiling them made a greasy, delicious soup that looked like gray, clotted milk. My nephew, Majok, was my best friend, and we never quarreled or fought over playthings. Sitting in the sand, we liked to mold mud into model cows, goats, people, and dogs, and make houses for them. I used charcoal and ashes to make white cows, black cows, and black with white spots cows, or white with black spots cows. We could make brown cows from brown soil, and gray cows from gray soil. Sometimes we picked snail shells and used them the same way as cows. We were learning to be fond of cows, and our playing never stopped until we were called for breakfast or dinner, but Majok lived far away, and we saw each other rarely. One day my father called to me, "Majok is here to visit today. Do you want to go play with him?" My father took me to his first wife's home, where many people had gathered. I was very excited. The women were cooking a goat, and later there would be a celebration. We would sip broth and eat goat meat. My father sat under an acacia tree with many other men. Among them was a man taller than my father who was wearing a blue garment. He was the center of attention, and everybody listened to him. While the men talked, Majok and I played around the hut. Before long, a girl of our age called to us. "Your father said the sun is getting hotter. He wants you to play inside the stable." As Majok and I entered the stable, 2 men came from behind and blocked the door. One man grabbed for Majok. He jumped aside, but the other man caught him and flung him over his shoulder and carried him out. The door closed, and I was left in the dark, listening to Majok's fading cries, "Let me go! Let me go!" My heart beat like bees' wings, but I stood rooted to the ground. I wasn't like Majok. He was fast and alert to trouble. I was always calm and did not quickly understand danger. That was why they grabbed him first. After a few minutes, Majok began crying even louder than before, and his screams seemed to go on forever before they turned to muffled sobs. Light rays penetrated the dark stable as my father stood at the open door to my relief. "Come, son, let's go." Something in his voice told me he wasn't there to rescue me. "Why is Majok crying?" He was just scared and cried pointlessly. "Don't be like him. Be strong and brave like my usual son." "I am strong and brave. I don't cry for anything." "Good boy." He grabbed my hand, holding it tighter than I had ever felt, and he led me to the acacia tree. All the eyes of the men were on me like hyenas, staring at a lost goat kid. I got scared and stopped walking. My father lifted me up into the air. Now I knew there was something bad. I kicked my feet and slapped my hands to his chest. 4 men grabbed me and laid me on my back, holding me down and turning my face up to the sky. A pot of water boiled on a fire. The man with the blue robe was washing the blood off a razor blade. I knew that blade. My father kept it on the roof beam and had used it many times. After each use, he would wash and dry it in the sun, and then rub it on the grain shafts to sharpen it. The man kneeled and leaned over me. He took hold of my penis and began cutting off the skin. I'd never felt such pain in my life. I tried to jerk away, but I was held so strongly that I couldn't move a muscle. The pain felt like he was tearing my skin off with only his fingers, not cutting it with a sharp blade. I cried, but it was going so slowly. My voice began wearing out. My mother came, and tears were flowing down her cheeks. "The blade is blunt," said the man who was cutting off the skin. "Ma, please help me," I cried. "They are killing me." "Be calm, son," my father said. "It will be over soon, and then you will be a strong and brave son of mine." When the man finished, they washed me with very hot water, and my father carried me home on his shoulder while I dripped blood all down his shirt. After a few weeks, I was playing and wrestling with the boys again. When the girls sang this song, "Uncircumcised, he is like a cow with an untrimmed tail. When he farts, it smells like broth," I was happy to have passed the uncircumcised stage, but it wasn't worth the pain I went through. When I sometimes have nightmares about all the things that happened when our peaceful village life turned to chaos, that feeling of not being able to move during my initiation still overcomes me.